Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about a specific line in the King's Gambit, and I'm going to show you three games briefly. And the line we're going to discuss in the King's Gambit in the Falkbeer variation, E4, E5, F4, D5, Falkbeer counter gambit, E takes D4. We're going to look at the move E takes F4 and not the old variation of the Falkbeer, the original intent of its creator, which was E4 driving a wedge in the position. We're going to look at the modern approach E takes F4, but specifically at the knight F3, knight F6, and then this move, bishop C4, which is the main line. And I'm not showing you this to really discuss opening theory per se, but I want to share with you the evolution of the main line in this opening, or give you just a brief sketch, and to show you how new ideas come about in the games. So bear with me, and hopefully things get clearer as we move on. I'm going to be flipping the board depending on which side is the victor in the game. So right now, this first game I'm going to show you, again, it's going to be brief, is from 1998. The white player with the white pieces is Alexei Fedorov, who I believe is the last great 2600 to 2700 level player to regularly play the King's Gambit consistently. He stopped playing it in about early 2000s, I think. But he had many great games in the King's Gambit, and he believed in it, when nobody else believed in it. And he has many brilliant games. This game is between him with the white pieces, Alexei Fedorov, and a player named Fedorov-Kazhgaleyev, who was rated 2550 at the time. Again, we're looking at this line with bishop c4, which is considered the main line. Now, I want to show you what the modern line is today. So after these moves, bishop c4, knight takes d5, recovering this pawn, castle, bishop e6. Why bishop e6? Well, bishop e6 has this not so subtle threat of knight to e3, winning that bishop on c4. So often the bishop will drop back. Other moves are possible, like rook e1 or queen e2, but the main line is bishop b3, and then again other moves are possible, but c5 has the same intention of playing c4 and drawing this bishop back to this vulnerable square, and then playing the move knight e3 with the same threat as before. The other benefit of c5, besides being an immediate threat, is to limit white's expansion with d4. Okay, in the center, which is very important. So d4, he can just trade the c pawn for the d pawn, and white center is not so imposing. So the main line continues, d3, then knight c6, and then we can see here this pawn is being defended by this knight on d5. So therefore the main line continues, bishop takes d5, removing that pawn. Queen takes d5. Of course, the bishop takes is possible, but queen takes d5. Bishop takes f4. Black gives back the pawn. Bishop e7, knight c3, and queen d7. And theory holds that black is equal, if not even slightly better, having the bishop pair and good control in the center. So this is like the modern approach for black in this main line. Now, I wanted to show you the main line, so it's kind of showing you the end of the movie, and now we're going to go back to the beginning of it. So now that you see that main line, you'll see how some of these ideas evolved, like for instance c5 from black. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the featured game, Fedorov versus Kazhgaleyev. So bishop c4, knight takes d5 castle, bishop e6, bishop b3, and here Kazhgaleyev played not c5 but bishop e7, which is also playable, but it allows the expansion of white in the center. Not that black is lost or anything, but you must be careful not to be just pushed into a passive position. Knight b6, d4 from Fedorov. Notice the c4 pawn can be captured, but white has excellent compensation. Therefore, Kazhgaleyev castles here. For example, if knight takes c4, white just keeps developing. Knight c3, excuse me. Knight b6, offering this trade here, and also the idea of blockading on d5. So d5, bishop f5, white recovers the f4 pawn, castles. Knight b5 attacking c7, knight a6, and then either rook c1 or d6. C takes d6, and white has excellent compensation for the pawn after knight takes d6. So even though white is down a pawn, look at how his pieces are just swarming in the black position. Alright, this is what you want as a King's Gambit player. This is why Fedorov feels justified in playing the move d4. King's Gambit player is not afraid to sacrifice a pawn. In this case, it's completely justified. So after castle, white just has space. Now black has a solid position, but so does white. And white has space to boot. Game continue, d5. Because after bishop g4, bishop takes f4, white just has a simple advantage here. And the main feature in this position to look out for is this 4-3 pawn majority on the queen side that white possesses. This, along with this space, gives him two options. With this space, white is able to coordinate his pieces in such a way where he can conduct a kingside attack. There's no knight on f6, and so white has attacking opportunities on the king side with the open e file, f file. So there's different options. The diagonal, the b1 diagonal to h7 diagonal, right? You can easily picture a bishop being, the light square bishop being transferred to c2, queen to d3, lining up against the king side. White's play is pretty simple. Black, on the other hand, is kind of cramped, and it's very solid, but kind of doesn't really have a lot of counterplay here. So the game continued. Bishop d6, of course, cramped side is seeking trade pieces. Queen d2, bishop takes f3, rook takes f3. So notice how that trade improved white's position. The rook being on f1 is now on now on f3. Right? It has increased mobility now that it is on the third rank. Knight 8 d7, knight c3, knight e5, rook h3. So we see here white probing the king side. Knight g6, bishop e3, avoiding trade. Now that white possesses the bishop here. Knight d7. And this knight is on his way to f6 to try to fortify the king side. But what's great about white's position is the option to push the pawn's majority on the queen side. There's bishop c2, so you can see the transfer, as I spoke about earlier, of pieces to attack the king. That's a result of having all that extra space. Rook e8, knight e4, knight f6. Now, although black wants to trade, this move is not good, because after knight takes f6, queen takes f6, the queen is brought to a very vulnerable square and is immediately harassed with tempo by the rook on f1. Don't even think about taking this pawn right here. If the queen takes b2, bishop g6 just wins immediately. So, queen e7, just losing time. So, as you can see, black really has no counterplay here. And this is the type of position that white, loves. He has nothing but winning. He's only playing for a win here and no chance to lose. King takes time, gets off any possible pin situations after bishop c5. Bishop c5, he just takes. Queen takes. Queen c3. Now, again, maybe at the bishop c5, white could have attempted to keep the pieces on board, but it's kind of hard to think of a constructive place to put the dark squared bishop. So he simply decided to gain time. And now, with some of the pieces traded off, white switches gears to plan B, which is to expand on the queen side. Notice that queen c3 protects the c4 pawn and also prepares the advance b4. This is what happens. Rook e7, b4. And just notice here how white is operating on two fronts. King side has to be watched, right? For instance, this knight can't move. And he's moving up the board on the queen side with his pawns. Queen d6. And now bishop b3. Bishop b3 is simply preparing c5 by protecting the d5 pawn with the bishop. Knight e5. c5. Queen a6. Attacking the rook. The rook goes to e1. Rook a e8. Rook h e3. So just putting maximum pressure and pretty much paralyzing the black pieces. h3. Knight g6. Rook d1, preparing to push the pawns one more square. There's d6, c takes d6, c takes d6, queen c6. Now, of course, black would love to take this pawn, but his king has safety issues, and after rook takes d6, queen c8 would win. For instance, after king e7, and rook e1 check, but queen c7 is strong also, and that wins. So, queen c6, offering this trade of queens, and perhaps hoping to round up this pawn afterward. Queen d4, offer another trade, and Fedorov says, okay, I'll give you a trade, but on my terms. So queen takes, and now the pawn on d6 has a protector. Knight e5, rook d4, rook b4, and I'll leave it right there. But white went on to win this game, pushing his pawn majority. Excuse me. Now, I want you to look again right at this beginning stage where I showed you the pawn center. So you have pawns on c4 and d4. Okay, now let's fast forward, and this is actually this is the same year, and this is I forgot to tell you where this was. This game took place between Fedorov and Kazhgaleyev. This is round 6. This is at the Alista Chess Olympiad in 1998. This is now round 8 of the same Olympiad. So Fedorov has the white pieces again, and he's playing Fedorov-Svidler with the black pieces. So now I'm going to flip the board so we can see from Svidler's perspective. So perhaps Fedorov-Svidler got a chance to see this game in round 6 and, you know, prepare a little something for it. So from here, bishop c4, knight d5, castle, and we see bishop e7 again. Remember, I told you that today the main line is bishop e6 and bishop e3 and c5. Bishop e7 is playable, and it's still played, but more popular is the bishop e6 now. Bishop e7 is played. Bishop b3 by Fedorov. He just goes back anyway. And his idea here is not, of course, knight d3 is not a threat. Is he wants to play the same idea of this expansion. And he wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to be able to attack on the king side like he did in last game. Right? Pressure the king side. And if that works, hey, great. You know, you have an early day at the office. But if not, you have this 4-3 majority on the queen side. So this is the idea behind bishop b3. Also, of course, preserving pieces. Because, again, he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He wants these endgame chances and attacking chances. So bishop b3, castle, and there it is, c4. And now Svidler goes right back to f6, which is a good move because it brings the knight back to his natural square, natural defensive square. Because remember, one of White's ideas is to generate these attacking chances on the king side. So keeping the knight over there definitely gives White, gives White a harder, more difficult time in attacking on the king side. d4. So what are you gonna do? White has built up his center just like he wanted to, and the onus is on black to either destroy this center or just make it a liability for White. We saw last game where the center of White just kind of rolled through. He pushed the majority. So how can you pressure this center here? Well, Svidler shows us the way in this game. Plays bishop g4. Again, don't try to be greedy and hold on to this pawn right here. If you can hold on to the pawn, you do it, but you don't want to destroy your position in the process. So bishop g4 is the first step. He takes, right? Bishop takes f4, and now knight c6. And now this pawn is really under pressure because now the threat of bishop takes knight is imminent. If queen takes knight, then, you know, the pawn just drops. Check or whatever. And if rook takes knight, then this pawn is just going to drop. This causes White to take a step back in his plan. Of course, he doesn't want to play d5. This is what I mean by the center becoming a liability. He doesn't want to play d5 at this point. Because after bishop c5 check, the holes start appearing in the White center. King h1, and then you have moves like knight d4. Alright. So yes, White has the center, but it becomes a problem now instead of an asset. This is why he drops back and plays bishop e3, because right now his pawns are very strong as a duo. Svidler plays a real natural move and just simply plays bishop takes f3. Now, you normally don't want to just give up the bishop for the knight just unprovoked like that. But here, there's a definite concrete, and the key word is concrete. There's a definite concrete purpose behind doing that. White must ruin his pawn structure in order to preserve the center. If rook takes f3, knight g4, attacking this bishop, and then this pawn is going to drop. And of course, there's no need to show queen takes, because again, the pawn will drop. So g takes f3 is the only move. So here, White's position is taking a little bit of damage, and now Fedorov, right, as any good King's Gambit player will do, will move the king to h1 and try to make use of this open g file. You know, turning apples or lemons into lemonade, right? His pawn structure is shattered on the king sides, but he says, hey, now I have an open file, and I'll use that. Svidler plays rook e8. Now queen d2. Knight h5. The idea with knight h5 is to play bishop to f6, again increasing the pressure on the center. Let me just give black an extra move. If he can move again, have bishop f6 here, and now you have 3 units attacking on d4. Alright, and it's just too much. For example, this threat, let's say rook d1, then you can attack this guy. You can play queen e7. I'll just show you. Queen e7, right, attacking the bishop. Say bishop f2. And then followed up by knight f4 after, say, queen d3. Or, say after rook d1, you can just simply take, and after queen takes, you can play bishop takes. Okay, so that's the idea with knight h5. So just don't think it's some type of random continuation. Therefore, Fedorov plays d5. So again, notice how he's sticking to his plan, because like I said, I showed you the last game, and you can see he's doing the same thing. He's trying to anyways. Svidler has made it difficult for him, right? There's no, remember there was like all this potential attacking chances on the king side last game and on the queen side. Here, Svidler is fighting back admirably, and it's difficult for White to achieve what he's trying to achieve. So here is plan B again with this expansion on the queen side. But again, is it a liability or not? Here, Svidler played knight e5, which is a good move, a natural move. c5. And here's a moment of truth right here. Is the center for White strong or is it weak? b6. There's no way to, you know, you would love to bring this pawn up here. There would be no problems for White. However, what do you do? Okay, c6 is clearly no good, as it just halts everything that White is trying to do. And after simple bishop d6 and say knight c3 and queen f6, you know, black is just doing okay. No complaints. Okay. So Fedorov plays d6, c takes d6, c takes b6, a takes b6, knight c3. And he tries to jettison a pawn for activity, but Svidler's position is excellent. Knight c3. So now the knight f6. The knight just comes back. Again, notice the value of that knight being on f6 to defend d5 and e4 squares. Rook a d1. Rook c8. Queen G2, finally trying to utilize the G file. Now that the queen side aspirations are over for white. Remember that what happened to that 4-3 majority on the queen side. So Svidler shut that down. So now Fedorov goes back to the idea of trying to attack on the king side. But black has all his pieces out, and just taking control at this point. He's up a pawn. So bishop d4, bishop f8, rook d3, d5. Good move by Svidler, supporting the knight, shutting the bishop on b3 out. King h1. Now knight e5, attacking the rook. Rook e3, bishop c5. So rook takes e5, bishop takes d4. Again, Fedorov is trying to generate some attacking chances. G6. Knight takes d5. And here's a real strong move by Svidler here. Rook c5. f4. And of course, f4 protects the knight on d5 in case you're not paying attention. So knight e4. Of course, every pawn advance leaves a weakness, right? You've heard that before. So f4 left the hole on e4. Svidler jumps right in there with tempo against the rook. Of course, Fedorov, being an extremely aggressive player, plays h4, and he's willing to part with the exchange and hopefully get some compensation. After, for instance, f takes g5 here. And hoping that, there'll be something going on this f7 square. Svidler anticipated that and just simply moved the king to the side. Because he realizes he's winning and there's no sense in complicating matters. Knight b4. Revealing the attack here. And now knight takes g5, f takes g5. Rook f5, just, hey, we're going to trade off rooks. Knight c6, and then queen d6, and Fedorov resigned. There's nothing that, that he can do here. So those two games right there kind of show you the, White's plan, and also it shows you how black dealt with White's plan. Now I'm going to show you this final game and tie in why I showed you the main line at the beginning. Because you might be saying, well, what does this have to do with the main line at the beginning of the game? So let's go. Now this is from the European Team Championship. And Georgia, in the former Soviet Union. And this game is between Alexei Fedorov, again, with the white pieces, and former world championship candidate, I think, who was one-time number 3 in the world, Yusupov. Now, let's see how Fedorov learned from his loss against Svidler the year before. And this is, how chess openings evolve. Because we see the main lines today, but we have no idea how they got there or why the moves are played sometimes. But there's often a long story behind certain variations. Now, after seeing the last game, perhaps you can understand why Fedorov decided at this position, instead of playing bishop b3 like he had been playing, he simply captured and played bishop d5. This brings the queen right out into the open with tempo to be hit by knight c3. Now, the downside is, okay, black right, is losing time, right? It's kind of like the Scandinavian a little bit. Black is losing time here with his queen, but white is giving a very powerful bishop, right? That light square bishop on c4 with its long-range attacking possibilities on f7 definitely will be missed. So for this gain of time, black, for his loss of time, black is also given the bishop pair on the silver platter. So it's a double-edged. So Yusupov here played queen d8. He just goes back, right? d4, of course, with the idea of just simply playing bishop takes f4, bishop d6, protecting, queen e2 check, and now queen e7. Yusupov. So the game looks equal, but it's dangerous. Fedorov goes right into an ending, right? So he simply just wants to play that plan B that we looked at earlier, which is that the utilization of the 4 to 3 queen side majority of pawns. So bishop takes. And no, he did not just hang a piece. Knight d5 check. And knight takes f4. So now the bishop pair is gone for white. Although he still has a bishop. For black. Although he still has a light square bishop. Now here we see that although the queens are off the board, white does possess a slight lead in development, and his development of his king side will be a little bit problematic since he lost his right to castle. So knight d7, castle, and this king still has to be careful being on the f file lined up with the rook. So knight f6, knight e5. So now that knight on f6 always has to be wary. a5. Yusupov foresees the plan that white has of just expanding on the queen side and tries to slow that down somewhat. Another idea is that it's difficult for him to place this bishop at this point. As you can see, d6, d7, e6, these squares, it's not clear where to put the bishop. So he decides to bring his rook out this way and possibly attack on the 6th rank. Bishop f5 is possible with the attack here. Okay. That was another possibility in the position. You got knight d5 with this double attack. And of course, if bishop takes c2 now, and knight takes f6, and this is ruinous for black. There's too much pressure here. That was just to give you an example of, just some of the issues facing black in his development here. So he has a solid position, but the prospects are kind of bleak right now. He plays a5, c4, and again, here's the same plan. It's basically the same as when he had the queen, when Fedorov had the queens on the board. Is generate attacking possibilities on the queen side, but have the 4 to 3 pawn majority ready to go for plan B. So here you see the same thing. So rook a6, yes, d5, h5, h3, keeping pieces off g4, h4, rook a, e1. Bishop finally gets out. Knight e2 with the discovered attack on the bishop. So rook h5, And that looks like a natural move there, because he wants to get his rook out, something terrible. So he brings the rook out to protect, and has ideas like bishop takes h3, where he can snatch up the knight on e5. However, the tactics just don't work out for Yusupov here. It's the g4. But I think that it wasn't necessarily an oversight by Yusupov, but that he just figured that, hey, I have to get my pieces out here. And after all, it looks like after bishop takes g4 that maybe he can get enough pawns in compensation for the piece. And this is what he decides to do, albeit misguided. So rook g6, pinning the pawn. b3, rook takes g4, and now white is up a piece. Although black has these 3 pawns on the king side, they're very far away from posing any real danger to white at this point. King h2, a4, knight c3, forcing black to help white in his aims to create a passed pawn on the queen side. c6, d6, just bypassing everything. And here's a move that perhaps I believe Yusupov overlooked. A brilliant move. I mean, if you want, you can pause the video, and see if you can find the move that Alexei Fedorov made. Really fantastic move, because I think that if Yusupov saw white's next move, he wouldn't have played c6. He would have, maybe tried something, still losing, but maybe try something like rook g3, attacking the knight here. Then play could go, for instance, knight b5 or something like that, and then perhaps c6. Okay. So if you didn't pause the video, I'll give you the answer. So after c6, right, no doubt Yusupov is hoping or wanting or expecting move like this. But after d6, rook d4, because after all, how is white going to defend this pawn? Right, if he goes rook here, that's a natural looking move. Alright, you got rook takes d1, rook takes d1, and king e8. Again, white is still better, but this pawn is not going to queen right away. So Yusupov Fedorov played knight d5, just blocking the action of the rook on d4. And after rook d2 check, king h1, and he resigned. There's really nothing that can be done. Notice how the rook isn't over on d1 as in the other variation, so therefore the king can't come over to support. This means that the only way to stop this pawn from queening is for black to just start giving up the exchange. By playing rook takes d5. Any rook takes d5, c takes d5, rook takes d5, which will then be followed. Matter of fact, I'll just show you the variation, but it's easy win, light work. Okay, so now the pawn is there, but then rook e7. So now you had this finish on the 7th rank. Okay, so now if he takes, of course, then the pawns start dropping on the 7th rank. So this shows you how the Fedorov had evolved and playing this line as an improvement over the Svidler game where he got in trouble. And of course, if I kept going on and on, you would see black finding an improvement in this line to instead of playing queen d8, okay, where white was able to create sustained pressure. Okay, so again, showing you now, going back to the main line here. A few years later, in 2000, this is when they were holding those FIDE World Championship knockout tournaments for World Championship. Alexei Fedorov played with the white pieces here against Grandmaster Alexander Ivanov. And I just wanted to show you real briefly, instead of queen d8, and which is playable but gives black a little bit more difficult game, queen f5 was an improvement that was found here in this particular line. When bishop takes d5, queen takes d5 is played right away. Where queen f5 is played, of course, getting the queen out of danger, but making it a bit more difficult for white to gain his pawn back on f4. This game went castles, knight c6, d4, bishop e6, and we can already see black's idea of castling on the queen side, which is made easier by the queen being on f5 as opposed to d8, where it would be in the way. And this is how ideas evolve in chess, and this is how you must think, and this is how you study your opening. You want to understand the variations and absorb them. You just don't want to be playing by memory, because you won't feel comfortable in the positions where you kind of know what's going on in the background, the opening, and okay, this was played here, but this guy played this because of this and that. Then you have more of a feel. I hate using those terms because they're vague, feel, but it's hard to use, it's hard to use good, proper words. But yeah, you want to get a feel for the position. And one of the ways of getting a feel for the position is just kind of digging back a little bit and looking at the evolution in the opening. You can see that Fedorov had lost. Then he was like, okay, I need to try something different here. I can't play the same thing, And you see white looks for improvements, then black finds an improvement, and white finds an improvement. It's like an arms race. It goes back and forth, and then you will see that what evolves out of that, which is the main line. The main line might be the main line for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but those main lines are often the result of many years and many thousands of games of practice at high levels. Here after knight e2, of course, we can see the attempt to get this pawn. Now g5 is justified because black is simply going to castle here, and he's going to use his pawns to generate an attack on the queen side. Fedorov says, hey, all right, you got it. You're not going to let my bishop out this way. I'm going to fianchetto and put it right here. Castles. Bishop e2. Bishop d5, preventing this discovery, because you can see the rook on h8. c4. Bishop takes f3. Rook takes f3. Opposing bishops. Queen d2. Rook h8. And black is just simply better here. He just simply up a pawn and fully develops. There's d5 again. That age-old plan at 4-3 majority in the queen side. Bishop takes, queen takes. Queen e5. Knight e5 is probably even stronger. Right, just attacking. Don't be afraid to attack if you're black. Everything is pointing toward attack here. You have these broken up pawns on the king side, far advanced. Everything is pointing toward knight e5 here. He played queen e5. Knight c3. check. Again, it's like, why not get this piece in the game? You know, knight d4, knight d4, knight f5. Come on, man. Knight d4, knight f5, and e3. If I could see that. Anyway, queen d4 check. Rook f2, knight e5. Finally, an endgame. Queen takes b2. Rook takes b2. And white is just winning here. Just totally dominating again. Knight g4. Now it's going to come to e3. And here, I had the game ending in a draw in my database, but white is winning. I mean, excuse me, black is winning here. Who knows what the match situation was? Ivanov, if he did accept the draw here, Ivanov, this must have meant Ivanov was winning the match, and instead of it's kind of like an honor thing. Like, instead of inflicting Fedorov with another loss, he just like offers him a draw. He still loses the match, but it's kind of like instead of losing 2-0, he's like, all right, he just loses 1.5. Because if Ivanov was down in the match, he would have definitely played this out, and my result would say 1-0. But for those interested that want to look it up, this is Alexei Fedorov versus Ivanov, and it's from 2000, the World Championship FIDE knockout tournament. All right, so that ends our presentation on that particular foray into the King's Gambit Falkbeer variation, this bishop c4, which again is considered the main line. Of course, there's all the c4, bishop b5 check, d5. Like, again, this wasn't opening survey, but it's just interesting to see how these things develop. Now, I just want to end this with this main line again. If the knight takes d5, not bishop takes d5, but this line, the main line, with castles, bishop e6, bishop b3, right? Remember that threat, knight e3, and c5. And you can see, based on the games I showed you with that 4-3 queenside expansion idea, how this move c5 is very useful. How it sticks, it throws like a monkey wrench in that idea. And now it's easy to remember a move like this because you know what white is trying to do. And it plays against the idea. So instead of this pawn being basically behind the scenes, so to speak, and not getting involved in the fight for the center, it comes into the game and with the threat of playing c4. d3. Again, knight c6. And don't get me wrong, g5 is playable here, but you want to concentrate on completing your development here. So knight c6 is the main line. And then now this bishop needs to get out. So the relinquish the white relinquishes the bishop here. Knight c3, and now we are back to our main line in the bishop c4 variation of the Falkbeer counter gambit. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you on the next one.